So, the NBA season is right around the corner. Recently, NBA players and owners got together and decided to start the 2020-2021 NBA season on December 22nd, meaning that it is literally a month and a half away before we start up another NBA year. And because everything is moving so fast, I decided to make a video recapping the 6 major facts that we have learned about the NBA and the NBA season and how they could potentially affect what we should expect moving forward in this upcoming year. But more importantly, with the new NBA season right around the corner, that does mean that I will be dropping more videos on this channel more consistently with the draft, off-season trades and signings, and of course the NBA season less than a month and a half away. So make sure you hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. But with that being said, let's get right into the 6 things that we've learned in the 2020 season. Number 1, the Philadelphia 76ers poor roster construction. As of right now, we are roughly 6 or 7 years deep into Joel Embiid's career, and not too far after he entered the league, Ben Simmons followed. And since then, the Sixers have tried their hardest to piece together a championship caliber team around their 2 franchise players, but unfortunately it just hasn't worked out whatsoever. And more importantly, I do believe this past offseason will be the pivotal moment that many people look back on to what exactly went wrong with the process. Because after a very successful season and potentially being just one shot away of making the conference finals, the Sixers took a massive step in the wrong direction. Not only did they lose Jimmy Butler in free agency, but also JJ Redick, and in an attempt to replace that type of productivity, they brought in Josh Richardson as well as Al Horford. And unfortunately, neither one of those additions made any significant impact on this team whatsoever. But what's even more concerning for the Sixers are the massive contracts that they gave to Al Horford and Tobias Harris. Outside of a trade, there isn't much that the Sixers can do moving forward due to the financial commitment that they gave to both Tobias Harris and Al Horford. And what's even more concerning is Al Horford's fit on this roster, because it was very obvious not only during the regular season but also during the playoffs as well that Al Horford on this roster just isn't a good fit, especially in the front court alongside Joel Embiid and Tobias Harris. Now, luckily, the Sixers still have some time. Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons are still young, and Embiid is still under contract for another 3 years. And with a new head coach and some fresh faces in the front office, you can easily still be optimistic about this organization and this team. However, if the process fails to win a championship and inevitably forces the Philadelphia 76ers to trade Joel Embiid and potentially rebuild from scratch, it will be undeniable that the 2019 offseason and the 2020 regular season was the turning point for the inevitable demise of this organization. Number 2, the Denver Nuggets have a title contending team. So in the NBA community, we do this thing where we go out of our way to try to figure out who's next, who is the up-and-coming team that has a potential to win a championship, the young squad that could dominate the league moving forward. So much so that some people go out of their way to make these hypothetical transactions to try to make the argument that the Chicago Bulls or the Phoenix Suns are up next, even though there are teams that are right in front of us that many people just overlook, and the Denver Nuggets are one of those organizations. The Nuggets over the past 2 years not only have had one of the best regular seasons in franchise history, but also have competed not only in the regular season, but also in the playoffs at an elite level. And this year was exceptional, especially the postseason run. Now, during the regular season, the Nuggets were a top 5 offense, which normally superseded their subpar effort on the defensive end, and leading the charge was not only Nikola Jokic, but Jamal Murray. Head coach Mike Malone really shined throughout the year, including the playoffs, and the supporting cast that surrounded both Jokic and Murray honestly was a pleasant surprise, and I don't believe a lot of people will give them their proper credits, but of course Jeremy Grant, Gary Harris, Paul Millsap, etc., etc. And then when it comes to the playoffs, not only did the Nuggets finish in the conference finals, but they were able to do so in historic fashion by, amazingly enough, coming back from 2 1-3 deficits. But what's even more impressive from the Nuggets is that this year they might have found their third option with Michael Porter Jr., a young prospect that they selected back in the 2018 draft with the 14th overall pick, who had a lot of injuries, especially the one sustaining to his back, that could have been career altering. But this year there were moments of excellence that not only justified the selection, but potentially could have also increased his value so much so that he could be a trade piece in the upcoming offseason. And honestly, that could be the biggest concern for the rest of the league, because when you look at the players, you look at the contracts, and you look at the young core that is in Denver, the Nuggets have a lot of options for what they can do next. But moving forward, for the next 5 to 7 years, the Nuggets will be a force not only in the Western Conference, but in the entire league. And it's only going to take 1 or 2 moves to truly cement them as NBA champions. Number 3, the Bucks' big problem. After having back-to-back great regular seasons, as well as having the league's MVP on your roster for 2 consecutive years, the Milwaukee Bucks' goal of reaching the finals and competing for a championship was still not met. And unfortunately, a lot of it has to do with the exact same problem that they saw last year, and that is their half-court offense. Some people believe that Coach Budenholzer just isn't good enough, that he should have an offense that is a little bit more complex, a little bit more density when it comes to the type of off-ball movement that you would like to see from some of the players. Then you have some people who believe that Chris Middleton just isn't a good enough second option. And then you have some people, including myself, who believe that the Milwaukee Bucks committing to Eric Bledsoe instead of Malcolm Brogdon will inevitably bite them in the back when it comes to Giannis's decision to either stay or leave in free agency. And after acknowledging those symptoms of the bigger problem, of course, some solutions have arose, many of which have just concluded in either trading for a player such as Chris Paul, or potentially even moving Chris Middleton to get in a legitimate second option. But honestly, I don't think any of that is going to make a massive shift soon enough because of Giannis's looming free agency. Now, honestly, in my opinion, I believe the biggest problem is Giannis's inability to create his own shot in the half-court offense. Because even though on the fast break he's unstoppable, he has a massive advantage when it comes to height, size, and weight. And yes, he is the league's reigning back-to-back MVP. It is still frustrating to see Giannis struggle and at sometimes even be contained just because he cannot create his own shot in the half court. The Bucks have to address their half-court offense problem, because in the playoffs, they just will not make it deep enough to compete for a championship, which also will be another problem that they will face with Giannis potentially leaving in free agency in the upcoming offseason. And when you have a small market that is losing one of the best players in the NBA, sometimes it can take them years or even decades to regroup themselves and put themselves back in that position. Number 4, the Miami Heat position themselves to be a great destination team for star caliber players. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the Heat have done it yet again. If you don't know the full process from their last finals appearance up until this year, I actually made a video about it. I'll make sure I leave a link to it in the top right hand corner as well as at the end of the video. But in short, despite the fact that they lost not only LeBron, Chris Bosh, and D Wade, the Heat have not only put themselves back in a position to compete for a championship with another great regular season run, but what preceded this year was an off-season signing of Jimmy Butler, which not only gave them a legitimate star, but potentially a co-star in the near future, because the Miami Heat and that well-ran front office have not only pieced together a championship caliber roster, but they've done so in a way that have left them multiple options in the upcoming free agency classes due to their financial flexibility. Because entering the 2021 free agency class, the only 3 major players that will be under contract for the Miami Heat are Jimmy Butler, Andre Iguodala, and Tyler Hero. And then when you even look at players such as Bam Adebayo, Duncan Robinson, and Kendrick Nunn, the Miami Heat should have the ability to retain them thanks to them being a restricted free agent as well as having their bird rights. But even further than that, if you look at a lot of the young players on this team, they obviously are pieces that could potentially be moved if the Miami Heat want to get to that star caliber player a year early. Number 5, OKC won the trade, which is surprising to me because I have been one of the very few people who has been hypercritical on Sam Presti and the job that he has done in OKC over the past decade, largely because where we were back in 2010 with the core of OKC to where we are right now, and because of that, it just felt natural for me to continue to question Sam Presti, especially after he pulled the plug and just decided to trade both Russell Westbrook and Paul George. But it seems as if Sam Presti, that organization, and the roster came out as massive winners, which historically very rarely happens when you're trading 1, let alone 2 top 15 players in the NBA. And what makes it even more interesting is the massive haul that they received in return. So hopefully Sam Presti and the Thunder are able to turn it around sooner than later thanks to the trade package that they received in return for both Russ and PG. And then when it comes to the Clippers and Houston Rockets, I'm not going to spend too much time on them because I do believe there will be more changes that will happen to the roster in the near future, but it is very interesting to see what those two organizations will do next, because even though yes, both of them receive top elite caliber players, they still struggled in the playoffs, not meeting expectations. And when it comes to the Clippers, not only did they get knocked out in the second round after blowing a 3-1 lead, but more importantly, both Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are only guaranteed to be on the roster for one more season, because after this upcoming season they have a player option on their contract. So there is a huge possibility that the Clippers gave up not only Shai Gilgeous-Alexander but also all of those draft picks just for essentially a rental for both Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. And finally, the Lakers have the best duo in the NBA, which is important to state because last year entering the new season, the whole narrative was that there were no longer any super teams. Every team that was considered to be a title contender featured a duo on their roster. And with there being some questions about where LeBron ranks in the NBA as he was aging and coming off of a potentially career-altering injury, as well as Anthony Davis's inability to have any consistent impact on winning, at least on a massive scale. And then of course there were some concerns that were raised with a player like Anthony Davis playing alongside LeBron James, when historically speaking, the best players to put around LeBron are either ball handlers and three-point shooters, things that Anthony Davis can do, but obviously he's not known for. But here we are now, and everything is as clear as day. LeBron James has taken back the title of being the best player in the NBA. Anthony Davis, with an amazing regular season and a historic postseason run, has really made a compelling argument to why he should be considered to be a top 5 player in the league. And with both of them together, not only do we have arguably one of the greatest duos in NBA history, but more importantly, entering the next season, there is a legitimate argument that the Lakers now possess 2 of the top 5 players in the league, which would make it immediately difficult for practically any other team in the NBA to compete with them, regardless of how shallow the rest of the roster may look after this upcoming offseason. But hey, maybe that's just my opinion. Please let me know what you think about the video in the comment section below. Again, these are the 6 biggest factors, and things that you need to know about last season entering this upcoming year. And with the NBA having a quick turnaround to the next upcoming season, make sure you hit the subscribe button because I will be dropping more videos more consistently. But until next time, I will see you all later. Peace.